Hi guys, good afternoon. Um, Welcome to your first online session. Today we are speaking about the first formative component, which is so it's English that word level 12, 3, 4, 3, 6, 7, 5, 4. Okay, hold on. Change the language. Oh yeah. Okay. Um, so our first formative component, which is if I had tried this before, I wouldn't have produced it in math. Si hubiese probado esto antes, no lo había producido en math. So last week we saw, um, we did our introduction class, and I noticed that we have two formative components, right? But the first one, let me share the screen with you. The first one is very long, so we have to divide it by two. So today we are going to see the first part of that component, and then the next class we will see the second part of that formative component. Okay. I didn't notice how long it um, and it's very long. Let me show you. So if I had tried this before, I wouldn't have produced it in math. We click on that, and there's the topic that we have for this formative component: past simple versus past perfect. That is a very long topic. Then we have third conditional, modal verbs, relative clauses, pronouns, verb as subject, argumentative expression. So we are going to see at least past simple versus past perfect, the third conditional, modal verbs, and maybe we have enough time, pronouns. So from here to 6 p.m., kinda, uh, we are going to see the topics. Okay. So let's see the first one, which is past simple. Okay. Let me stop my camera for 1 second. I just had a class before this one and I have a mess on my screen. Okay, let's see the first topic, which is past simple versus past perfect. So we have past simple. So past simple is basically something that happened in the past, and then you have to specify when it happened, right? So simple past is a tense when we speak about something in the past and we have to specify when that action happened. Okay. So something that we have to keep in mind, something called grammar structure. So the grammar structure for every tense, simple tense, continuous tense or progressive tense, perfect tense, perfect continuous tense, every tense in English use the same grammar structure, which is for positive or affirmative sentences. We use the subject, the auxiliary, the verb, and the complement. For negative sentences, we use the subject, the auxiliary in negative, the verb, and the complement as well. And finally, for questions, we have the auxiliary, the subject, the verb, the complement, and the interrogation sign, right? That is the same for every tense, except for present simple and past simple. In present simple and past simple, we don't use the auxiliary. Um, we don't use the auxiliary when we make positive or affirmative sentences, right? We say, for example, in present simple, we say, I play soccer, right? Or let's use, I play football, right? Everybody says football except the American and the Australian. The rest of the world say football, so let's call it football. So for present simple, we have I play football, right? We have the subject, we have the verb, and we have the complement. We don't have the auxiliary. We can use it. We can say it, I do play football, but we only use it to actually confirm something. So for example, someone asks you, hey, do you play football? Right? And you say, yes, I play, for example, or yes, I play football. And then someone tell you, really? Like they are adopting you, right? Really? You? So then you say, yes, I do play football, right? But that's the only case when you use auxiliary with a positive sentences, right? When you are confirming, confirming, right? Something that you do, or confirming something, right? That's the only case where you use the auxiliary in present simple. So it's not that very common, right? That happens with present simple and past simple. In past simple, we say, past simple, we say, I played football, right? We have the subject, we have the verb, and then we have the complement. So for present and past, we don't use the auxiliary in positive sentence. So for present and past simple, we don't use the auxiliary in positive sentence, right? So that is something that we have to keep in mind. Now, in past simple, we know that the verbs, most of the verbs, we only add ed at the end. So for example, walk, in past simple, walked, talk, in past simple, talk, want, in past simple, wanted, learn, in past simple, learned, etc., etc. If the verb ends in E, we add D at the end. For example, use ends with the word E, so we add D at the end. Change ends with the word E, so we add D at the end. Believe, believe, erase, erase, escape, escape, experience, experience. And finally, we have the verbs that ends in Y, and before the Y, we have a consonant. That is very important. In that case, we change the Y by IED. So for example, a study ends with a Y, and before the Y, we have the D, which is a consonant, right? We have study, white, and before the Y, the D, which is a consonant. So we change it to studied. Try also ends with a Y, and before the Y, we have an R, which is a consonant, right? So we change it to try, copy, copied, cry, tried, dry, dried, fry, fried, spy, spite, right? For example, play, played, also ends with a Y, right? But before the Y, we have a vowel, which is an A, right? So in that case, we don't apply the same rule, right? We don't apply the same rule. So we don't say apply it, right? That is wrong. We don't say that. We in change, we say played, right? Why? Because it ends with a Y, and before the Y, we have a vowel. And it's like this, a consonant before the Y, right? So we create the verbs like this in past simple. Those are the regular verbs. Irregular verbs are 150, and we have to memorize those. So for every word, for every regular verb, we use the same verb for every subject. I, you, he, she, we, they, you. Proper nouns like Pedro, so proper nouns like Pedro, right? New York, Bogota, right? City names or people's names, and then common nouns. So the name of the things or the name of the animal. So for example, the dog, table, etc. So for every subject, we have the same verb. Play, right? I played, you played, he played, she played, it played, we played, they played, you played, Pedro played, the dog played, right? The same verb for every single person, for every single subject. With irregular verbs, the same thing. So for example, find, I found, you found, he found, she found, it found, we found, they found, you found, Pedro found, the dog found. So the same verb for every single subject. Like I said before, like I said right here, simple past, we have to specify when the action happened, right? So which is why there are some complements that are very common in past simple. For example, ago in Spanish, antes o hace. For example, 3 days ago, hace 3 días. 5 weeks ago, hace 5 semanas. 2 years ago, hace 2 años. Then we have last, which means pasado o hace. Last night, anoche. Last week, la semana pasada. Last month, el mes pasado. Yesterday, ayer. And finally, the years, right? So for example, in 1954 or in 2026, right? So those are the most common complements. Why are the most common complements? Again, because we have to specify when the action happened with simple past. Okay. Keep that in mind because that is the difference between simple past and perfect and past perfect. Okay. So for example, okay. So for example, let's make a sentence in past simple. Entonces, let's say I played football 3 weeks ago, right? So we are specifying when this action happens. Okay. So that is the difference between past simple. And then we have past perfect, right? So past perfect is basically a tense which is used to describe action that happened before another action in the past. Okay. So for example, before I went to bed last night, this is in past simple. Before I went to bed last night, I had finished my work. This is past perfect. So that is the difference between the two, right? So past simple, we have to specify when the action happened, right? In that case, we use a time, we use weeks ago, we use hours, we use years, we use the word yesterday. With past perfect, we have to specify what is the action that happened before. Okay. We can write it like this. Before I went to bed last night, I had finished my work. Or you can write it like this. I had I had finished my homework before I went to bed last. Okay. In Spanish, we can do the same thing, right? We can say, before I went to bed last night, I had finished my homework, or I had finished my homework before I went to bed last night. In Spanish, we say, antes de acostarme anoche, había terminado mi tarea. O podemos decir también, había terminado mi tarea antes de acostarme anoche. Right? So Spanish and English are very similar in that topic, right? The grammar structures are pretty much the same. Obviously, there are many differences, but we have that advantage. Spanish and English are very similar. For example, Chinese, Japanese, every Arabic language, the Russian, all of those languages are very different than English. Spanish is not. So that is one advantage that we have. Okay. One other example. By the time Sarah arrived at the party, so this is simple. Noting that past perfect always or most of the time is accompanied by a past simple sentence. Okay. So past perfect and past simple. Why is that? Because the past perfect tense is used to describe actions that happen before another action, that happen before something else. Usually, that action is in past simple. So what does that mean? So we have the present, right? We have the future, we have the past, and right here is the past perfect, right? So that is like a way to notice what it happens. So this is past simple, right? So past perfect always happens before past simple, which is why they are always together, right? We had already eaten dinner, so this is past perfect. By the time Sarah had arrived at the party. So you can write it like this, or you can write it like this. We had already eaten dinner by the time Sarah arrived at the party, right? So you can write it on both ways. There is no difference between both, okay? He realized he had left his wallet at home after he had already ordered his meal at the restaurant. So we have two past perfect sentences. Okay. Usually it comes with a past simple sentence, but it can come with another past perfect as well. Okay. So he realized he had left his wallet at home after he had already ordered his meal at the restaurant. Or you can say he had already ordered his meal at the restaurant before he realized he left his wallet. Okay. So once you change it, you have to change the um, the um, the connector. Okay. Oh, I make a mistake right here. I had finished. I'm sorry. Before I went to bed last night, I had finished my homework. I had finished my homework. Ah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sorry. In this case, you have to change it. He realized he had left his wallet at home after he had already ordered his meal at the restaurant. Yeah, in order to change it, so you want to say he had already ordered his meal at the restaurant. At the restaurant. In this case, you have to change it before, right? You can't use after anymore. Before he realized he had left his wallet at home, at home, right? Entonces, él se dio cuenta que él había dejado su billetera en la casa después de que él había ordenado su comida en el restaurante. Si quisiéramos cambiar el orden, entonces hay que cambiar el conector. Él había ordenado su comida en el restaurante antes de darse cuenta que él había dejado su billetera en la casa. Mientras que el de arriba no, el de arriba sí puede uno decir, antes de que él se fue a la cama, había terminado mi tarea, yo había terminado mi tarea antes de que él se había dado a la cama. En este caso sí tiene sentido dejar el mismo conector, pero acá no, ¿vale? Entonces por eso a veces traducir la frase al español, si la frase no tiene sentido en español, no va a tener sentido en inglés. Funciona en la mayoría de los casos, por eso siempre digo que las dos estructuras gramaticales del español y el inglés son muy parecidas. ¿Ok? Another example, when I got to the airport, the flight had already departed. So the flight had already departed. That is past perfect. When I got to the airport. And that is past. Okay. So that is the main difference between past perfect and past simple. Again, past simple, we specify with a time term, weeks, months ago, hours ago, centuries ago, in 1994, yesterday, last week, last month. We specify in that way when that action finished. Meanwhile, past perfect have to finish before another action. That action usually in past simple. Sometimes, like we saw before, it can come before another past perfect sentence. Okay. So what is this grammar structure? It's the same that we did before, right? The grammar structure. The grammar structure, the same for every tense. So for positive, again, positive subject, auxiliary, verb, complement. In this case, the auxiliary is had, right? For negative, we have the subject, auxiliary in negative, verb, complement. In this case, the auxiliary in negative had not, or the contraction hadn't. Every contraction is made the same way, right? Auxiliary in apostrophe T. The same way. The only one that is different will the contraction word. That's the only one that is different than this one. The rest of these auxiliary and apostrophe T. Okay. So had not, had, hadn't. That is the contraction. And then for questions, we put the auxiliary first, and the subject, verb, complement. In this case, the auxiliary is ha, ha, okay? The verb, in this case, the verbs are made the same way as in past simple when we talk about regular verbs. So regular verbs, again, most of them you only add ed at the end. If the verb ends in e, you have to add d. If the verb ends in a consonant and there is a y after that consonant, you change the y by ied, right? Regular verbs. Irregular verbs, you have to use past participle, right? So when you search in the web irregular verbs, you have the Spanish word, for example, manejar. Then you have the verb in present drive. Then you have the verb in past simple drove, and then you have the past participle um, verb, right? Let's find one. Okay, so for example, you see the Spanish word right here, present simple, past simple, and past participle. These, the third line, are the one that you have to use for past perfect. So those are the difference between past simple and past perfect. So past simple, verbs in past simple. Past perfect, verbs in past participle. All right? Okay, so let's see some examples of positive questions. She had visited the museum before. Ella había visitado el museo antes. They had completed the project on time. Habían completado el proyecto a tiempo. He had read the book before the movie was released. Él había leído un libro antes de que la película se estrenara. In negative, they hadn't heard the news until today, or they had not heard the news until today. The contractions are very common in conversations. Okay, the contractions. The whole word had not is the most common in writing, right? She hadn't traveled abroad before this year. Ella no había viajado al extranjero antes de este año. I hadn't met him before the party. No lo había conocido antes de la fiesta. And an interrogative. Have you ever been to London before your trip last summer? ¿Habías estado alguna vez en Londres antes de tu viaje? Had they finished their work when you arrived? ¿Habían terminado su trabajo cuando llegaste? And had she seen the movie before reading the book? ¿Habías visto la película antes de leer el libro? Antes de leer el libro, right? So those are the interrogative ways. Now let's see a little bit more of the difference that they have. So past simple is an action completed in the past where when you have to specify when it's finished. A past perfect is an action that happened before another past action. In this case, it can be past simple or it can be another past perfect sentence. Very often, both tenses appear together in one sentence. Okay, so that's what I say. If you are making a sentence in past perfect, usually it comes with a past simple sentence as well. So if two things happens in the past, the earlier one often use past perfect. The other one, the one that comes after, usually in past simple, usually, not all the time. Okay. So for example, we have past simple is used to action that finish in a specific time in the past. From verb visited, finish, when, so. So we use some complements, some very common complements, yesterday, last night, years, 2 days ago. So it tells us what happened, not what happened before. It tells us what happened and when it happened, because we have to specify. All right. So usually when you say yesterday in 2020, last week, an hour ago, that means that is a sentence in past simple. Past perfect is used to say when something happened before another action. So the form is subject, the auxiliary, the verb in past participle, and the complement. Had eaten, had left, had finished, had seen. It gives background. This action was already complete. Great for stories, sequences, and cause effect situations. She had left when I arrived. So which action happened first? The action that happened first comes with had left. With I'm sorry, the action that happened first, you have to write it in past perfect. The action that happened after that, you have to write it in past simple, usually or sometimes in another past perfect tense. For example, when I arrived home, my brother had already eaten. So already eaten happened before the person arrived home, right? When I arrived at the cinema, the movie had started. So for you guys, what happened first? You can write it on the chat. So for you guys, when did that action happen? When I arrived at the cinema, the movie had started. What happens first? The movie had started. That's the first action that happened. So usually the one that happens first, you have to write it in past perfect. Mhm. One more. Well, not. So she had finished dinner before he arrived. So what happened first? The dinner or that he arrived? Dinner. Mhm. That happens first. The second one, they had left the house before the rain started. So what happened first? They left the house or the rain started? What happens first? They left the house or the rain started? At left. Mhm. Yeah, left. Mhm. And finally, the third one, I what this one says. I had never seen the movie. So when something didn't happen, you always use the word never. I had never seen that movie before yesterday. In Spanish, yo nunca había had seen, visto la película ayer, right? So something that is very important to know, or that is a theory to learn English, is that the more you know how Spanish work, the easier for you to learn English. Why? Because they are very similar. Let's use the last example. I had never seen, I had never seen that movie before yesterday. That movie before yesterday. If we want to translate this to Spanish, we can use the same grammar structure and we only have to translate, which is why the more you know how Spanish works, the easier for you to find how to translate a sentence. For example, in this case, yo nunca había visto esa película antes de ayer. ¿Ok? Antes de ayer no quiere decir anteayer, sino antes de que yo la vi ayer, ¿sí? Antes de haberla visto ayer, entonces antes de verla ayer, digámoslo, para especificar bien, antes de verla ayer. I had never seen that movie before yesterday. Yo nunca había visto esa película antes de ayer. Antes de ayer, mejor. Antes de ayer. Entonces, we have the subject I, the subject in Spanish, yo. We have the auxiliar had, in Spanish, había. We have the word never, in Spanish, nunca. We have the word in past participle, sin. Tenemos el verbo en pasado participio, también se llama así, visto. That, esa, movie, película, before, antes, yesterday, de ayer. So basically the same structure, which is a huge advantage for us when we want to learn English. English and Spanish are very similar. Okay. So that is something that we have to keep in mind. The more you know how Spanish works, the easier for you to learn English. Why? Because your brain, basically, your brain will find the translation easier. Your brain will find the translation easier, right? Obviously, this comes with practice. To learn English, that is something very important to know. To learn English, 90% practice, 10% the class, the theory. Okay? So this is way more important than this. Okay? That is something that you have to keep in mind. So that is the difference between the two words, okay? I'm sorry, between the two sentences. Past simple, we have to use it. We have to specify when that action finished, either last week or 2 years ago, yesterday, in 1954, whatever. Past perfect is an action that happened before another action, okay? So that is something very important to keep in mind. Now, past perfect, I don't know how to say this. It's not very common to use that. Okay. Sometimes you use it, sometimes you don't. It's not that common to use that. Yeah, I don't want to say that. No, never mind. But yeah, it's not that common to use it. Um, Usually people speaking in passive. Now, the second topic that we have is the third conditional. Third conditional is basically when you regret something. So basically, it's something to talk about unreal past situations or and regrets, right? Um, so for example, a past situation that didn't happen, imagine result in the past. So if the first part is not real, the second part is unreal too, is not real or is imagined too, right? So the first question that you have to ask when you use the conditional is this real? Yes. If that is real, if that didn't happen, if that actually happened before, if that actually happened, then you have to use the normal past, so past simple. If that didn't happen, then you use the third conditional, right? That is the first question that you have to make. Now, if comes with the auxiliary had, and then we have the past participle. This is basically past perfect, but they call it third conditional. Okay, if this happen, this will happen. Okay, both situations are unreal. They didn't happen at all. That is something that you regret, right? That you regret. This is regret. Regret in Spanish, arrepentimiento. ¿Ok? Entonces, algo de lo que usted se arrepiente de no haber hecho. Entonces, si esto no pasó, esto tampoco. If I had studied, I would have passed the exam. If I did this will happen. But I didn't do this, so this didn't happen. Right? Si yo hubiera hecho esto, esto hubiera pasado. Pero como no hice esto, esto no pasó. Entonces, por eso es que usamos el tercer condicional para hablar de arrepentimiento. Si yo hubiera estudiado, yo habría pasado el examen. ¿Listo? Entonces, básicamente eso es lo que son los terceros condicionales, la tercer condicional. Si yo hubiera hecho esto, habría pasado aquello. ¿Listo? Pero como las dos situaciones no son reales, ¿cierto? Perdón, las dos situaciones, la primera situación no pasó, que es que no estudié. Es por eso que la segunda situación no pasó. Como no estudié, no lo pasé. ¿Listo? Pues básicamente lo que quería decir en español para que lo tengamos, para que lo entendamos bien. A mí siempre me gusta hacer equivalencias con el español, porque vuelvo y repito, entre más español usted sepa, es más fácil aprender inglés. Si usted sabe cómo funcionan los tiempos del español, una vez que usted aprenda los tiempos del inglés, usted va a encontrar las equivalencias y le va a ser muchísimo más fácil traducirlo, mucho más fácil aprender. Listo, ese es todo el español que tengo para hoy. Okay, so the reality is that I didn't study, which is why I failed the exam, right? I didn't study, I got an F in the test. Now, which is the regret, alternative path, or regret, arrepentimiento, right? If I had studied, I would have passed, right? That didn't happen, this didn't happen, right? I didn't study, which is why I failed the exam, right? One more question. If she had left earlier, she would have caught the bus. Notice that every sentence starts with an if. If in Spanish, sí, ¿vale? El sí, no el sí de yes, sino el sí de is, ¿vale? Sí condicional. Si hago esto, pasa aquello. If she had left earlier, she would have caused the bus. So what happened? She came late. This is the reality. She came late, right? Which is why she missed the bus. So what is her regret? Her regret is that if she had left earlier, she would have caught the bus, right? Okay, yeah. So something that it didn't happen in reality, I didn't go. If I had gone, that would be the third conditional, right? Something that didn't happen, but you wish it happened. It didn't happen. Right? I missed the party. I would have had the fun. We left late. We would have arrived on time. If he had studied, he would have passed. Okay, well, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. No, no. All right, so tier conditional is talking about regret. That is basically past perfect. Okay, the only thing that we add, the only is basically right. No, not this. So this is basically um past perfect. The only difference is that we add the conditional is. Okay, that is the main difference between the tier conditional and past perfect. We add the conditional is in order to regret something that we didn't do in the past. Okay, so that is the difference between the both in both sentences. Something in the chat, like all action have consequences. Exactly. So if you didn't do something, now it's not the time to regret that you didn't do it, right? Now we have modal verbs, and that I think that's the last thing that we have today. Modal verbs. Let's open the modal verbs. Modal verbs. These are very easy. Modal verbs are basically auxiliary verbs, right? They are also known as auxiliary verbs. Why are they known as auxiliary verbs? That is very easy. Okay, we have the grammar structure again. I'm very annoying with this thing, I know. I'm pissing you off, repeating the same thing every time. But that is very important. This is very important. This is something that you have to keep in mind, which is why I repeat it every freaking time. I'm sorry about that. Subject, auxiliary, verb, complement. For negative, again, subject, auxiliary in negative, verb, and complement. And for question, auxiliary, auxiliary, subject, verb, complement, complement, and interrogation sign. Modal verbs, also known as modal auxiliary or auxiliary verbs, they are called like that because they work like an auxiliary and a verb at the same time. Okay, they are both an auxiliary and a verb. So when we make negative sentences, we have to put them in negative as well. And when we make question, we have to put it at the beginning. Okay, I will show you. I will show you some example of that. Right. So they are both auxiliary and verb. Auxiliary and verb. They are both at the same time. Okay. Um, Well, there are a group of auxiliary verbs in English that are used to express different grades of possibility, necessity, skills, or permission. They modify the main verb in a sentence to transmit an attitude or a point of view. Okay, so they always come with a different verb. So, for example, the first one, which is can in Spanish, poder, right, is used to express skills, abilities, capacities, or possibilities. Okay, so for example, I can swim. If I want to put it in negative, this is positive, right? Positive. If I want to put it in negative, I can, I can, or I can not swim. You can write it like this, can not, or you can write it like this, cannot, which is more, this is more common. This is more common than cannot. Entonces, so I can swim, I can't, or I cannot swim. For a question, this is a question that we usually make. Can I go to the bathroom? And this is wrong. This is a bad question. Why? Because it used to express ability, capacity, or possibility. Can I go to the bathroom? I mean, can you? That's the first thing that they are going to tell. I don't know. Can you? Why? I don't know. Why can't you go to the bathroom? What happened with your legs? Are you there's something wrong with you? So what is the right way to ask if I can go to the bathroom? Could. That could be another possibility to say. Could I go to the bathroom? This is the right question. Okay. So don't use can to make this kind of question. Don't use can. Don't use it. Don't use it to for permission. No lo usan para permisos o para pedir algo. No lo usan. ¿Okay? Could is used to express skills in the past, possibility, or a permission, educated permission. Okay, so could I go to the bathroom? She could play the piano when she was younger. This is skills in the past, habilidad en el pasado, skills in the past. She could play the piano when she was younger. If you want to put it in negative, she could not, or the contraction, she couldn't play the piano when she was younger. We don't pronounce the L, could, okay? Could. She couldn't play the piano when she was younger. Then we have may, which is also used to express possibility, permission, or a educated question. Yeah, educated question. May I borrow your pen? Yes. In positive, you might borrow my pen. In negative, no, you might not borrow, borrow, borrow my pen. Might, this is may, this one is might. This is used to express a minor grade of possibility than may or could. So it might rain later. So what is the difference between could may, and might. So could, may. Let's suppose that in the sky we have a dark sky. There are many clouds, and there are a few drops of water falling, right? So there is a bigger chance to rain. So if there is a bigger chance to rain, we have to say it might rain later. A bigger possibility to rain, right? But if we have a sunny day, right, and then we see a few clouds on the horizon, on the mountains, we see a couple of black clouds, right? The possibility is way less than before, right? So then we use might because it's a smaller possibility to rain. So that is the difference, right? In reality, you can use any of them and there is no difference at all. Okay? You can use any of them and there is no difference. Then we have the word must and shall and should. They pretty much mean the same thing in Spanish. They mean deber, right? Debería in Spanish. All of them means the same thing. What is the difference? Must is something that you have to do. Otherwise, there are very bad consequences, right? So, for example, you must complete your homework, otherwise, you will fail the class, right? You have very bad consequences if you don't do this. Okay, you must complete your homework. If you are in a very dangerous place, right? Sometimes you can find a sign that says you must not touch the fence, right? You must not touch the fence because it's an electric fence. Otherwise, you you will get electrocuted, right? So if you don't do this, there are very bad consequences, right? And therefore, question: must you finish your homework? Um, Must you finish your homework? Yes, you must finish your homework, otherwise you will fail the class. Okay, so you use must when there are something that might have very bad consequences. That is something that you have to do. That is something that you really have to do. In this case, shall and should are usually a recommendation, suggestions, or offers. Shall is usually used in Britain, which is why you usually see shall we, which means can we go, right? So it's used to express action, future action, suggestions, or offers. So for example, we shall meet at the conference. So this is a future. But we say we will meet at the conference. In the United States, this is not very common. Shall in the United States is very fancy. ¿Sí? En Colombia decimos, es muy pispirispis esta palabra, ¿vale? Muy gomelo. Entonces no se usa tanto en Estados Unidos esta palabra shall, más que todo en el Reino Unido. In the United States, we usually say should, right? Should is used to express an advice, a recommendation, or an expectation. So, for example, you should make exercise regularly. You should make exercise regularly, right? That is something that you don't have to do. It's something for your health, but it's not that important, right? Unless you have some healthy issues, right? If you have healthy issues, then this is not the word that you have to use. You have healthy issues. This is the word that you have to use. You must exercise, right? If you are about to die, you have to exercise. But if you are kind of fit, then it's more like a recommendation or an advice than actually something that you have to do. Okay. And finally, would is the in Spanish is the ending ría. So for example, comería, jugaría, pelearía, right? So this would is the same as this ending ría, ría, okay? Dijo que me llamaría. So in English, he said he would call me, right? Entonces, llamaría, would call me. I'm sorry, llamaría, would call. Comería, would eat. Jugaría, would play. Pelearía, would fight. Hablaría, would talk. Nadaría, would swim, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So these are the moral verbs. They're very easy. There always comes with another verb to make sense, right? You cannot say I can. It doesn't make sense like that, right? It always have to come with another verb. You cannot say it like in Spanish, yo puedo. You cannot say like that, I can. Yeah, people will say like you can what, right? So I can swim, I can play football, right? So it always have to come with another verb, right? You cannot say yo puedo like we say in Spanish, right? I can't, you cannot say that. All right. Okay, so that's the last topic that we have for today. The next class, we will see relative clauses, pronouns, which are very easy, verb as subject, and finally, argumentative expressions. Argumentative expression. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so next class, we will see that. Um, do you guys have any questions today, or you are fine with that? I guess there were no questions. Okay. So I'm going to, okay, yeah, you can write if you want to. Mhm. Go ahead, Richie. Meanwhile, I just wanted to show you. Yeah, the last date for you to give me your homework is April the 10th. Okay. Um, that is something that I didn't say at the beginning. But let me hold on, let me stop the record.